Welcome to the Worldwide Doula podcast. I'm Berry, I'm a registered nurse and birth doula, and each week I'm joined by a new guest speaker to talk about all things pregnancy, birth, babies, and parenthood. So it's time to sit back and relax as we get into some juicy topics. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Worldwide Doula podcast. Today I'm here with an amazing woman, Sarah. She's also known as the Embryologist Nutritionist. She's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to nutrition for IVF and fertility. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah. How are you this morning?
I am really good. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation we're going to have today.
Yes, it's going to be a really great one. In this episode, Sarah and I are going to be talking about how what you're eating could be affecting your fertility. We'll be covering things like what you can do now to prepare your body to conceive for later on in life, if you're not ready to conceive just yet. And if you're having trouble conceiving currently, some things that you can try to improve your fertility. Sarah, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your background in nutrition for IVF and fertility?
Yes, thank you, Barry. So a lot of fertility nutritionists have their own fertility journey, and that's why they've gone into that area. I'm slightly different. So many years ago, I worked as a clinical embryologist in IVF clinics for about 11 years. And that was what I did when I was straight out of university. Loved that job. It was amazing. But then after a certain amount of time, I obviously went on to have my own family and stopped working in that area. I then got into learning a lot more about nutrition. I was actually training for a big event and listening to loads of podcasts. And it was actually an Australian researcher that got me more into what nutrition can do for health. And that was Dr. Felice Jacka. And from there, I decided, yes, this is what I want to learn more about. I'm all about improving health and improving fertility. And it was learning more about the power of what you eat and how you live your life that can really support fertility. So with my background in IVF, it was a natural progression to support individuals and couples with their fertility and their IVF preparation, but from obviously a very different aspect, from a nutritional aspect. And the main aim is that people perhaps don't need to have IVF, and I can support them to not have to go down that road. But if they are going down that road, then I'm able to support them to optimize their chances as well. So my entry into nutrition and IVF and fertility support is a little bit different to most, but I think that my background has just given me that solid understanding of what's involved in IVF and gives me a little bit of a niche in that zone.
Yeah, it's great that you used to work in a fertility clinic. It's a little bit like me working as a doula and also having a background as a registered nurse, because if my clients go into hospital, then I know all the jargon, I know how the
Yeah.
systems work and all that stuff. So, yeah, how important is the role of nutrition in fertility?
An analogy I like to use here is if you think of your body as like a car, and if you were putting some poor quality fuel into it or some dirty fuel, it's not going to run very well. And no one would want to put dirty fuel into their car. We just wouldn't choose to do that. So from a nutritional perspective, if we transfer that over to the car being our body, if you're going to put lots of poorer quality foods into your body, you're not going to get the best out of it. And so that's easy to understand for things like metabolic health, cardiovascular problems. People can understand that more. Fertility is exactly the same. It's just that you don't see the effects of your eggs and sperm so much. But the nutrition and what you're putting in, they're still the building blocks of what's going to make your body healthy. And that includes eggs and sperm and hormonal balance. And we know that there's about 1 in 6 couples that now experience fertility problems and they struggle to get pregnant. And men's sperm count has decreased so much over the last few decades. So there are a lot more issues coming up and arising that tallies with the decrease in some of our easily accessible food products. Nutrition is so important for the quality of your eggs and sperm, for your hormonal balance, but also when you think about it for fertility, it's not just thinking about it for you. Those eggs and sperm are going to become your children. And there are so many studies around something called epigenetics, which basically means that what you eat now, even before you get pregnant, can impact those eggs and sperm and the future health of your offspring. So they've got studies showing how offspring could have a higher chance of obesity, of metabolic disorders from what you eat before you even get pregnant. So it is thinking about improving your fertility through nutrition, but it's also considering the future health of your children.
Wow, that's crazy. Wow, I can't believe that. I hear that you were an egg in your mum's ovary when
Yes,
she was
a
in,
fetus.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, it definitely makes sense that what you eat now will affect your children later on.
Yeah, I
And
mean, there's
yeah.
lots of studies that have been done to show that from the 1940s and the
Mm.
impact transgenerational for future generations. It's amazing. It's so fascinating. But I think because it's not something that you can easily measure with a blood test like you can with cardiovascular disease, people don't really think about it. Nutrition has such an impact on fertility.
What do you think the factors are that are changing the sperm count and the egg quality now?
Modern lifestyle has changed a lot compared to what it was, say, 60 years ago. I think there's many factors. We're a lot more sedentary, more desk-based jobs. For men in particular, that means that their scrotal area is just sat, getting nice and warm. We don't
Yeah.
want it to be nice and warm. The scrotum hangs lower for a reason because the testicles are meant to be cooler. From a stress point of view, we have a lot more psychological, physical stresses going on in our lives, and stress can lead to inflammation. Inflammation is really what we don't want in the body with regards to fertility because it can impact on the egg and sperm quality. And from a dietary perspective, the foods that are so easily accessible, the ones which are by the checkouts or in all those middle aisles of the supermarkets, they are ultra processed, and that tends to increase the levels of sugars and unhealthy fats. But when people are busy, that's what they potentially reach for. They go for the quick foods, and they're therefore not feeding their bodies in the most optimal fashion. There's lots of other potential things, that the increased use of the contraceptive pill and all of those getting into the water system. So potentially people are having an impact from drinking the water that's been recycled that might have hormones in it. So yeah, there's lots of various reasons that potentially are leading to that, but modern day lifestyle is a big factor.
What are some key nutrients that are important in fertility and why? I saw that you do these quick videos on your Instagram about that.
Yes, yeah, I've recently been doing some back to basics, really quick little videos, but some key ones. Vitamin D is really, really important. I think just about every cell in the body is reported to have a vitamin D receptor on it, which means that vitamin D is needed everywhere in the body. But from a specific fertility point of view, it's really important for the maturation of sperm and eggs. It's really important for the immune system. So if you think about when someone gets pregnant and implantation is happening, the embryo is essentially a foreign material because it's got some male DNA in there as well. And so the body has to tolerate it. It's called immune tolerance. And so the immune system is really important there. And vitamin D is very important for that as well. So vitamin D, you can find it in eggs and oily fish. It's known as a sunshine hormone because the main source of vitamin D is from the sun, which in certain parts of the world, especially like the UK at the moment, we don't get enough. So it's recommended for a lot of people to supplement vitamin D, but that's one of the really key ones. B vitamins are very important as well, especially folate, vitamin B9. The B vitamins are involved in energy generation, and that's when an egg is maturing or a sperm is maturing. It's a really intensive energy process, so they need a lot of energy to do that. They're also important for something called methylation, which is involved in DNA synthesis and cellular repair. So B vitamins are vital for so many different reasons. Again, they can be found in whole grains, your leafy greens, meat, animal products, you can find them there. B12 is only in animal products. Omega-3, which is found, again, mainly in oily fish, that is called an essential fatty acid. So it's something that our body can't make. So we need to get it from our diet. And it's really good for being anti-inflammatory. So as I mentioned before, inflammation is something that can arise from stress, from illness, from a poor diet, and can really have a negative impact on eggs and sperm. And so the more anti-inflammatory support we can put in, that's going to be beneficial for that. And omega-3s are one of those nutrients that can really support there. Antioxidants, they are really important. So when people say eat the rainbow of vegetables, that is because all those different colours in the fruit and vegetables bring different antioxidant properties. So they're all plant chemicals that can really support to combat oxidative stress, which can damage the DNA and the cellular membranes, and also things like vitamin C and E, zinc, selenium, they're all antioxidant properties as well. So that's another really vital nutrient to be including in the diet. And then another one, which is especially important for women as we get older, is coenzyme Q10. Because primarily it's an antioxidant and it's involved in energy generation. So again, egg maturation is really energy intensive. We need all those mitochondria, which are like the powerhouses of our cells, to be making energy, and CoQ10 helps with that. But as we get older, our levels of CoQ10 drop. And so I suppose another analogy here is if you think of finding a remote control car in the back of a cupboard and it's not working, and it's because the batteries inside it are a bit rusty. The mitochondria are those batteries. They're the ones that produce the energy. So we need to be really supporting those, and CoQ10 can do that because our eggs have been sat around since we were born. We're born with all of our eggs, and it's as we get older, the quality of them can decrease because the mitochondria don't work as well. So by supporting with CoQ10 from the diet, in whole grains, in offal like liver, in oily fish, that can support those mitochondria to function more optimally. So those are the main nutrients that have really vital roles. There's lots of other nutrients that are beneficial and can support fertility as well. But those are sort of the key ones I would think to mention.
And obviously, eating these foods that contain these nutrients is completely different to actually taking a supplement. People don't want to eat healthy 24/7. I mean, yes, there are people that want to do it, but sometimes it feels a little bit naughty to have that packet of chips or bag of lollies. And I think it's okay to have it occasionally, but if you're having it every single day, then maybe you need to rethink it. Would it be enough to just take the supplements like the Bs, the things that you can still get in the food very easily? And is the absorption different if it's a supplement versus a food?
Yeah, so I'm always a food first approach. Food and getting your nutrients from food should be the main place you go to, because it's not just the nutrients you're getting, it's things like fiber. And processed foods have little fiber in them. Your gut bacteria need fiber. That's what they thrive on to be healthy in a healthy digestive system. So food does come first, and you get lots of other benefits from it rather than just the nutrients. When I work with clients, it's not you must eat this and no bad food, because it's unsustainable. And when I work with them, it's obviously to help them with their fertility. But my mission is to educate them how to be healthier. So I want them to be able to take the information and have it for the rest of their life and live their life like that. And you can't always be perfect with your diet. So it's very much a moderation. And I always say it's an 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time, really try and fill your diet with all those great foods. And 20% of the time, enjoy what you want. The bag of chips, the glass of wine, the takeaway. It is all moderation, because all of those foods also make you feel better mentally. And mental health is really important. So it is a moderation thing. You can't out-supplement a bad diet. So you can't have a really poor quality, ultra-processed driven diet full of takeaways and sugary drinks and then think, oh, well, I'm taking a multi-supplement, I'm fine. Because yes, you'll still be putting some nutrients in, but the health of your body will be impacted by the poorer side of your diet. So you can't just out supplement. You do need to be focusing on food. And from an absorption point of view, it's very individualized. So everybody's different. And so one person's ability to absorb nutrients from food would be very different to somebody else. And that could be due to different conditions affecting the digestive system. So theoretically, the absorption of nutrients from supplements should be similar to food, as long as there's no conditions going on. But some supplements, the cheaper ones, unfortunately, it tends to be the cheaper ones, are not always in the most bioavailable form. And that means available for the body to use. So you can be taking a supplement, but maybe only absorb a very small amount of it, and the rest you're just excreting in your feces and your urine. It's understanding if you do take supplements, it's sometimes worth paying a little bit more to get a better quality one that you know is going to be supporting. And the supplements just kind of provide a backstop. If you're not reaching those nutrient goals, if you've got an infection or an illness, if you're experiencing a very stressful period of time, those are all drains on the body from a nutrient perspective. So in those cases, having a supplement is just going to be providing a little bit more support when your body really needs it.
Obviously, that ties in with gut health, correct?
Yeah,
Like
hugely.
absorption. Could you explain how our gut health is linked to our fertility?
Yeah, so gut health is just crucial. It's the center of all health, really. From a very basic level, we've just touched on the absorption. Optimal gut health is needed for the absorption of nutrients. So you could be eating the cleanest, most perfect diet on the planet, but if your digestion is not working optimally, your body can't absorb those great nutrients from the food. And those nutrients are like the building blocks. So your proteins, your fats, we need those for healthy functioning. So that's the basic level. If you're not putting those good building blocks in, then that's not going to be supporting your hormone balance, your sperm production. Everything that comes through our body or is produced in our body needs to be metabolized and detoxified and broken down. And hormones are no different. So estrogen, as an example, it's been produced, it's done its job where it's needed, and we're trying to excrete it. If digestion isn't optimal, and maybe someone's constipated, then that estrogen hangs around a little bit more. And if there's an imbalance in the bacteria in the gut, it can get reabsorbed, and then it circulates more in the body again, having more of an impact. So there are some people who have more estrogen dominant conditions like endometriosis, fibroids, and it could be that there is an imbalance in their gut, which is leading to that higher level of estrogen. So that's another way that gut health could impact fertility. And the dysbiosis is basically an imbalance in the bacteria. So we have trillions of bacteria living within us, and that's perfectly normal. We want them because they do amazing jobs for us, but sometimes those can get imbalanced and we can get more of the ones we don't want taking over a little bit. And one way that can impact health and fertility is through then leading to inflammation. So if the lining of our digestive system is irritated, it can lead to inflammation, and all parts of our body are all interconnected. But if there's inflammation in the gut, it can send chemical messages all around the body. So you might get skin conditions, you might get mood changes, but it can also impact your fertility, and the inflammation can impact the health and the quality of your eggs and sperm. And when there's a dysbiosis in the gut microbiome, it can often be reflected in the vaginal microbiome as well because of the proximity, but also just that interconnectedness of inflammatory signaling. The disruption to the vaginal microbiome, that's associated with an increase of early pregnancy loss, preterm labor, and pregnancy complications.
Wow. I know that gut health is so central to so many things, and it's so important to have good gut health. You highlighted multiple times about inflammation. What kind of foods are inflammatory?
The ones which are potentially inflammatory for everybody are things like those ultra-processed foods, very processed fats, trans fats, high sugar. A higher level of sugar in the blood can lead to inflammation. That's why a lower sugar diet is normally recommended. Alcohol can be very inflammatory, but for other people, it's very individualized and personalized because we are obviously all genetically and physically very, very different from each other. And we've had different exposures in our lives. For some people, foods like gluten, foods like dairy, they are quite inflammatory, but they are not inflammatory for everybody. So I don't want people listening to this to think, oh, I need to go and cut gluten and dairy out, because you might not necessarily need to do that. But for a lot of people, they can be inflammatory. I would never recommend someone to exclude and do a strict anti-inflammatory diet because they are very restricted, unless they were working with a practitioner to try and be guided through that process, because you're having to take so many foods out. You'd have to be guided through that and then try and reintroduce them. That was a very long answer, but in a short answer, the main ones that are inflammatory are things like sugar, alcohol, really ultra processed foods, trans fats, and the seed oils as well. So sunflower seed oil, rapeseed oil, they're very high in omega-6s. You don't want that higher level of omega-6 because they can be inflammatory. So it's trying to moderate those kind of fats within the diet as well.
And how does nutrition impact menstrual regularity and the health of your menstrual cycle?
So the body needs lots of nutrients for a healthy hormonal regulation and healthy menstrual cycle. Sometimes we see clients who have got either a very short luteal phase. So the luteal phase is the second half of the cycle that comes after ovulation, and it should be about 2 weeks. And sometimes people have quite a short phase there, or they may even lose their periods. They may not have any bleeds. And when that occurs, that can be due to having a poor intake, so under eating, over exercising. It's basically not eating enough, because you need to eat, especially carbohydrates, with ovulation and for progesterone production. And so when that luteal phase is shorter, or if someone's not cycling quite often, there's a progesterone issue. A healthy cycle means a healthy follicle. You need the follicle to mature, but you also need it to be hanging around after ovulation and secreting progesterone, then you get your menstrual bleed. And if you're not getting enough nutrition, then that could negatively impact your hormone production, which is then going to impact the regularity of your menstrual cycle.
While we're on the topic of menstrual health, I've come off the pill about 2 months ago. After being on it for several years, hoping to prepare my body to have a baby in the next couple of years. You know, I'm not ready right now, but I know that some friends have had some trouble getting their periods back and regularity and everything. To be honest, I thought that every time I went on the sugar pill, my period was coming back. And then I actually found that it was just a withdrawal bleed from the drop of hormone levels. And it's not actually an actual bleed. Now, I've been waiting for about, 65 days after my last period. And I still am waiting for my period to come back. Is there some foods that I could be eating to help my period come back, or hormone regulating? Because it's obviously my body's trying to get my hormones back in.
Yeah, it can take a while when someone comes off the pill for their cycles to regulate. Partly that depends on how old someone was when they went on the pill, because quite often people go on the pill in their teenage years, and at that point their cycles may not have regulated already. So they've never had a true regular pattern of periods when they go on the pill. So the pill kind of then just delays that process. And then when they come off it, the body's then trying to regulate where they're at. So it can sometimes take a while. From a dietary perspective, I would just say things that we've touched on already. Unfortunately, there's no one superfood that I could say, yes, take that and it's going to come back next week. I wish I could, but it's really putting a good amount of protein. So women especially are quite bad at eating protein, especially at breakfast time. And so I would recommend anyone looks at how much protein they're having, make sure they're having a good amount throughout the day, and include all those colourful fruits and vegetables, fibre, get your multi-nutrients in. Because one thing that the oral contraceptive unfortunately does, and I know I wasn't told this when I went on it, I don't know how many people ever are, but it depletes your body of nutrients. It depletes your body of the B vitamins, of zinc, of an absolute myriad of nutrients. And so it can take time for those to be restored. Whether looking at taking a good quality multivitamin would be something that would support that process to happen quicker as well, and being guided on that choice. But yes, just trying to pack as many nutrients in as you can and avoid the things that we've touched on that are potentially more inflammatory. For anyone that's looking to conceive in the next few years, that would be my top tip for what to do, and that would be to come off the oral contraceptive pill if you are able to, and use an alternative form of contraception, such as a barrier method or timing method, because as you're experiencing, it can sometimes take a little bit of time for the cycles to come back. And it's good just to let your cycles regulate and give it that time, rather than just thinking, oh, I'll come off this month and next month we'll start trying. As you'll find out, it doesn't always happen that easily.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think it's shocking at how little information we're actually given when we are started on the pill. I remember when I started on the pill, it was purely because of acne reasons. My mum basically took me to the doctor and said, what can you give her for acne that's not Roaccutane? And he said, oh, here, take the pill. And there's kind of an idea of long-term effects, but you don't really know.
No.
And then you come off the pill, and then even as a healthcare practitioner, like knowing these things, I'm still like, is it going to come back? I'm just waiting. And you just don't learn about this stuff until you ask the questions to a professional who knows more about it. So yeah, for those planning to conceive soon or in the future, like me, what is it that they need to start doing? You've kind of already touched on it a little bit, but is there anything in particular that they should start doing to prepare their bodies to conceive?
Yeah, as I just mentioned, that coming off the pill, if they're able to, that would be my top one. Sleep is hugely important. I think when we're younger, it's kind of a badge of honor if you can stay up late and get up for work the next morning and, oh, I only had 3 hours sleep. Yeah, I'm amazing. And it's a bit of a badge of an honor, but your body needs that sleep. Sleep is not a passive phase. So people think, oh, nothing happens when I'm sleeping. Sleep is such an active phase. The body is clearing up all the mess of the day and cleaning everything out, and it's vital. So really aiming for a good 7 to 9 hours of sleep and trying to keep a similar bedtime and wake time, because our bodies work on something called a circadian clock, which is basically means that they all work, all our systems have their own sort of clocks, their own timing, and everything works better when it's kept the same way. So minimal disruption to that. So sleep is also something to really try and focus on, and begin to look at your diets. So have an honest look at your diets. Are there areas where you think, well, actually, yeah, I only eat peas or I only eat carrots. I'm not having that variety of vegetables. Could I bring in another one or two? And start slow. Challenge yourself to try something new each week, because variety is so beneficial from all the different nutrients, from the different fibers that it provides. Another main thing is to look at your alcohol intake, whether you're smoking, whether you're taking any recreational drugs, because for both men and women, all of those have a negative impact. Vaping as well as smoking. People might think, okay, well, I'll give up smoking and I'll start vaping. Vaping is shown in the studies to be just as bad as smoking. So there's lots of chemicals in those vapes that we don't really know the long-term impacts of them, but they have been shown to affect sperm quality. So to stop smoking or vaping would be, again, a really high priority, and to stop using any recreational drugs if that is something that you're doing regularly or even not regularly. And alcohol is a debated topic. So a lot of studies have shown that binge drinking or heavy drinking can have a negative impact for men and women. But having the odd drink has not shown to be too impactful. It's not that someone has to completely give it up. You know, a couple of units a week is absolutely fine. It's just not making it very habitual or at a higher level. But obviously, again, that is something that's very personalised, and some people prefer to completely give up alcohol, which is absolutely fine. But I think those are kind of the main areas I would suggest someone would focus on, is just assessing their diet, stopping any of those recreational drugs, smoking, improve sleep. And if you are on a contraceptive pill and you're able to, then come off that and just let your cycles regulate again, so that when you do decide, okay, in a year's time, that's when ideally we'd want to be getting pregnant, then hopefully your body has had that time to get those regular cycles back.
I've heard somewhere, I think it was on another podcast, they said that ideally, how long before you start trying should you make these changes? And it said something like 6 months before. Like, is it ever too early to start preparing your body?
No, it's never too early, because all these changes as well are not just for fertility, they're for your health. So they're for your long-term health, because on what you do now, you might not think, if you're having a poor diet, you might not see the impacts now, but the impacts could come 20 years down the line when you're in your 40s or your 50s. So it's never too early to start trying to improve the diet, improving your lifestyle. What is heard a lot is a 3-month window as a very minimum. And that is because it takes around 3 months for a new batch of sperm to be produced. So men are very fortunate. They make new sperm all the time. So they can have a really poor diet, a poor lifestyle, and potentially by overhauling that, 3 months later, those sperm are then produced and ejaculated are much healthier, potentially, because they're making fresh sperm all the time. And as I say, it takes 3 months for those sperm to be produced and ejaculated. For women, obviously, we're born with all of our eggs, and they're kind of just sat in a holding system. And every month, a group of them start to mature and one of them will ovulate. But the final stage of that maturation again takes 3 months. So when they're really starting to pick up their growth. And so it's that 3-month window that is most impactful for them, and they could get impacted by diet, lifestyle. So 3 months is a very minimum amount of time that I would say for someone to start preparing. Longer, ideally, if possible, 6 months, a year, but it's never too early. From the point of view of, if you are looking to get pregnant, then 3 months on a methylfolate supplement is something that I would recommend, because that is one supplement that is always recommended women take if they're planning on getting pregnant. And I would always recommend that for at least 3 months prior to them starting, to prevent neural tube defects in pregnancy. So that's a methylated folate.
I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question.
Oh, I'll try.
Having sex every 3 days. If you have sex every day when you're ovulating, trying to get the egg and the sperm to meet, the sperm aren't at that optimal number yet, because every 3 days is like the optimal number. Is that true?
So you don't want to leave it a long time between ejaculations, because that means the sperm are hanging around more and more open to being damaged. So yes, more frequent ejaculation is advised, and 3 days is about average. That's probably about optimal. You can have sex every day, the count might be a little bit lower than it would be if you're having sex every 3 days. But sperm can live up to about 5 days in the female reproductive tract. So in that fertile window, you don't need to be having sex every day. If you're having sex every 3 days, that's fine, because the sperm are still going to be there where they need to be, hopefully, when the egg is released. And I think couples sometimes like it when they hear that, because that takes the pressure off a little bit, rather than thinking, oh God, we've got to do it again today. And it becomes a chore. And it shouldn't be a chore. It should be a beautiful thing. So yeah, so it doesn't need to be every day. There is no benefit to it being every day. Even when your partner is not in their fertile window, it's good to be ejaculating regularly. So sort of every 3-4 days, because that's just keeping the flow of the sperm. It's not letting them back up where there could be a negative impact on their quality. So just having regular ejaculation.
For women struggling to conceive, when would be the best time to seek help from a nutritionist or from a fertility specialist?
As soon as possible. If
Yeah.
they feel that they're struggling. I mean, in the UK, if they've been trying for a year and they're under 35, they would then be referred to a fertility clinic, 6 months if they're over 35. But I would say, I do think it's a good idea if someone's decided we want to get pregnant, even before they've started trying and found out that they're struggling. It's always a good idea to have an appointment with someone, maybe get a semen analysis checked, to see, are there any issues on the male side that are obvious, and potentially get some basic blood tests done just to look at your nutrient levels, your hormone levels, just to get an idea of whether there might be any issues. But otherwise, yeah, it very much depends on someone's age and how long they want to leave it before they seek out help. If you're mid-30s onwards, I would say don't leave it very long, because your eggs are aging and it's going to be more helpful to sort of get that support earlier.
A lot of women come to me, my close friends, my sisters, my sister-in-law, like, oh, I'm getting older. I haven't even married a man, let alone got one. I'm almost 30, or I am 30. What should I do? Should I freeze my eggs? Should I, just have a baby? Because I don't see myself getting married in the near future. I know that your eggs obviously age, but I've heard that because we're on the pill, more of us are on the pill, we're releasing less eggs. And those more fertile eggs with better health are actually being preserved until later on in life, until we come off the pill and we start releasing our eggs. Is that true?
I don't think there's so much truth in the fact that being on the pill means that you're preserving the quality of those eggs that aren't being released. They will still just be exposed to everything, and they will probably still become atretic. So it is a major thing that a lot of people are considering, freezing their eggs if they're not in a relationship, if they don't know when they might be in a relationship. Yes, there are a lot of people having families older, partly because of the wonders of assisted reproduction treatments, allowing people to be able to have children at an older age. But I wouldn't so much say that the quality of eggs is being extended for any reason. I do think if people are not sure what their plans are, it's a very good idea to at least speak to a professional in a fertility clinic about the possibility of freezing eggs, because you can still meet someone in your mid-30s and have a natural conception and get pregnant, but at least you might have eggs from 5 years previously stored in case you end up having struggles. Because as we get older, it's just the natural day-to-day life, exposure to toxins, which we can't avoid, they're everywhere. Daily stressors, they all have a negative impact on your egg quality.
And it's also, women are getting bigger jobs. They're focusing more on their careers. They're not focusing
Yeah.
on childbearing. So,
Yeah.
one of the biggest factors that prevents you from getting pregnant is stress. So, just make sure that you have those chill days, right?
Exactly.
Keep the
That's one of
stress
the
down.
major things I talk about with my clients, is having those stress management strategies. You can't avoid stress. There's a doctor in the UK called Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and I love his work. He spreads information for people about how to improve health. And he's got an amazing variety of books, and one of them is about stress. And he talks about having micro stressors. So a lot of people will wake up to a stress of an alarm clock waking you up. You then might look at your phone and you've got emails to reply to. It's just loads of different stresses. You get in your car to go to work and you're in a traffic jam. They might not be a big stress, but they all mount up. and we are exposed to all of them. So you can't avoid it. It's about how to offset it. And, you know, I suggest things like deep breathing. And people think, oh, I haven't got time to do this. Everyone has to go and sit on the toilet at some point in the day. Us ladies sit on it a few times a day. Men obviously stand. But you've got, say, 2 minutes when you can just sit there and do some really deep breathing. And that just helps to put the body into that calm, rest and digest parasympathetic phase. And if you do that 5 times a day, that's brilliant. And that's what taken 10 minutes spread throughout the day. But it's just trying to get those minutes of calm. And yeah, if you can have chill days, amazing. Just take that time out, find out what works for you. Whether that's, for me, it's walking the dogs. So I just love getting out, walking my dogs. Other people, it could be listening to a podcast, it could be cooking, it could be doing yoga, it could be a variety of things. It's finding what works for you just to help mitigate the stresses that come into daily life. And for fertility clients, they've got their daily life stresses, and then they've got the stress of not being able to conceive or going through IVF treatment and the financial stress that that brings. It's unavoidable, and it can potentially have an impact. So it's working the best way to support that.
Can specific dietary restrictions affect your fertility? Obviously, it's the nutritional value of what you're putting in your body, but like right at the beginning of the episode, you said something about you can only get a certain nutrients from animal products. I'm not vegan, but I am dairy free. I don't really eat eggs. I eat fish and I eat lots of vegetables. And sometimes I eat like chicken broth. It's just my body just doesn't feel very good when I eat like chicken or beef or, you know, duck or anything like that. So I just try and stay away from it. Do you reckon I can still get those essential nutrients if I'm not eating those foods?
Yeah, so there's lots of people who do follow different dietary patterns, vegans, vegetarians, pescatarians. If it's done well and they are aware of the different nutrients that they might be lacking and they support their diet supplementally, then yes, it can be absolutely fine. From the point of view of yourself, so you're pescatarian, so you're getting vitamin B12 is something that's found in animal products and is vitally important for lots of processes, but that will be in fish. So you're getting that through that. There are other nutrients that a vegan could potentially be missing out on aside from the B12. Iron levels. So iron's quite difficult. It's possible to do on a vegetarian or a vegan diet, but it's harder because the comparative amount of iron from vegan sources and plant-based sources is not as high as from animal sources. So iron is another area. Calcium, if you're dairy-free, again, you can get calcium in green vegetables, you can get it in sesame seeds and tahini and hummus. So you can get it from other food sources. From a pescatarian point of view, you can get it from your tinned fish, the little fish that you eat made with the bones, sardines, things like that. So it's really getting advice on how to support your own personal diet to the best effect. And for someone who's following a vegan dietary pattern, they would need to be supplementing with B12 for definite, because the body stores B12. You maybe have about 5 years worth, 3 to 5 years worth of B12 that could be stored. So if someone becomes a vegan, they might think, oh, I'm fine, you know, and for a few years, they won't notice any impact. But if they're not supplementing, after a number of years, they might start to feeling more fatigued and have symptoms because they've used up their stores of B12. So things like that are just really important to be aware of.
What are some other lifestyle factors that can help increase fertility?
Yeah, so exercise is an interesting one. It is good. Having a healthy BMI is advised. BMI is a very crude measure that I don't really like to use because it doesn't take into account someone's muscle mass. But it's something that's talked a lot in the UK about BMI. And if your BMI is above a certain level, you can't have fertility treatment. The reason being, when someone carries extra weight, it can have a negative impact. It can lead to more inflammation in the body. So that could have a negative impact on the sperm and the eggs. So daily movement is really good. It can just be walking, you know, if someone's going for brisk walks, exercise such as yoga or Pilates is brilliant. Some people take it to an extreme and sort of endurance exercise or running for a lot of time every day. It does put an extra stress on the body. Stress isn't always just psychological, it can be physical as well. So over exercising, we mentioned it before with the menstrual health and menstrual regularity, but it can put an extra stress in the body, which isn't always good because that can lead to inflammation as well. And so it is finding that balance. For guys, like I sort of said about the temperature of the scrotum, you don't want to increase that. So long distance cycling is not advised if you are going down that fertility path. Daily movement is great. If you've got a sedentary job, making sure you're getting up and moving around or have a standing desk, something like that is advised. And the only other thing I'd say is shift work, unfortunately, can have a negative impact on health, on hormones. Again, it's that circadian rhythm. It can disrupt it all. So it's been shown to impact testosterone levels, fertility, female fertility. So it's just something to bear in mind if any of your listeners are working those night shifts and doing different varied shift patterns, or working as aircrew and traveling the world, things like that. All of that needs to be considered, as it could potentially be impacting their chances of conceiving.
That's a really good point. Definitely something to consider. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's really hard because that's your job. If you say to a hospital as a nurse, no, I can't do night shift, or like, no, I can only do like morning shift, they'll be like, sorry, you can't work here.
Yeah, it's
You
it's
know?
very difficult. It's not that they have to change their work. It just means it might take longer. Their road might not be as straightforward. But yeah, I completely appreciate it's not as easy as just going into work and say, yeah, no, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a very good point to raise, though. So, endometriosis, PCOS, and hormonal imbalances are so common nowadays. Like, they're popping up like crazy. Are there any particular nutrients that can help with these conditions to improve fertility that they need to be eating
Yeah.
or taking?
Yeah. So again, it's individualized. It's very different for people. You mentioned endometriosis, fibroids. So they are very much an estrogen dominant situation. It's either someone's estrogen levels are very high, or estrogen has to be in a balanced relationship with progesterone. So it could be that their progesterone is really low. So estrogen might not be high, but compared to progesterone, it's much higher. In those kind of situations, trying to understand why they might have an estrogen dominant situation is really important. Is their digestion working? We touched earlier on the fact that for some people, estrogen can get recirculated in the body. So focusing on a nutrient support for digestion, getting enough fiber in, prebiotic foods, probiotic foods, cutting down the inflammatory foods. Cruciferous vegetables, so those are things like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, radishes. All of those kind of foods are really good for supporting detoxification. And as I said, all these hormones need to be detoxified. They're very supportive for estrogen and metabolism and detoxification. So including those every day in your diet if you are in that group of people who have an estrogen dominant situation. Then there are another group of people who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. PCOS tends to be when androgens, so testosterone, is quite high and they have a different sort of hormonal presentation. So they tend to have very long or very irregular cycles. A lot of them, not all of them, because there's lots of different subgroups of PCOS, but a large proportion of people with PCOS experience insulin resistance. So that is when the cells of the body aren't as sensitive to insulin, because insulin normally takes sugar out of the bloodstream and packs the sugar away for storage and for future use. But if the cells aren't very sensitive to that, then the blood stays with a higher level of sugar in it, and they are said to have insulin resistance. There could be thyroid imbalances, there could be post-pill PCOS, so that's a thing. But for those that have insulin resistance, it's really important to be managing blood sugar balance. So having more of a low glycemic diet, the foods that aren't going to raise your blood sugar very quickly, or that they're really good whole grains, avoiding anything that's refined carbohydrates. There is one particular nutrient that you would take as a supplement for PCOS that tends to be helpful for a lot of people, and that's called myo-inositol. So this is because it works on increasing that sensitivity to insulin on your cells. So it improves the body's ability to get the sugar out of the blood, which will then reduce inflammation. And that then supports also the hormonal balance, because the insulin resistance, it can impact the hormonal balance. So that's one nutrient that would be recommended that someone could speak to a health practitioner about, to make sure that they are appropriately supplementing if they were going to go down that road, or to be advised on it.
You kind of have to do a little bit of everything, a little bit of exercise, a lot of eating good stuff, being really aware of what you're putting in your body, being aware of what you're deficient in, and if you need some help, going and seeing someone who can tell you, because sometimes it's very confusing just doing it on your own.
Oh, 100%. If someone Googles, there's so many different opinions of high fat, low fat, high protein, and oh yeah, this nutrient's amazing and take this supplement. And it's completely overwhelming. So just speaking to a health professional and getting that opinion or a session just to go through what you're eating and how you can support yourself for your own personal situation, yes, can be very helpful and enlightening.
Are there any common myths and things that you hear about diet and fertility?
The main one that I imagine a lot of people have heard about is pineapple core. People saying, yeah, eat pineapple core, it will really help your fertility, it'll help you if you have IVF. And unfortunately, there aren't studies to back up that evidence. It's talked about because pineapple core contains something called bromelain, which is an enzyme and can have anti-inflammatory, anticoagulant properties. So it could potentially help, but the evidence isn't there. So I don't think anyone needs to go out and literally stuff their faces with pineapple core and think that that's going to work. You can include it as part of a variety in your diet. It's got vitamin C, it's great, but it's not a superfood that's going to make the difference. And I think that's what some people think, oh, just taking pineapple is going to really help. But the other thing, it's not so much a myth, but it's something that I like people to be aware of. And any doctors that are listening might think they don't agree with me. But in the UK, and I imagine all throughout the world, when people are wanting to get pregnant, they're told to take folic acid. And you do need to have some folate, but folate is different to folic acid. So folic acid is purely synthetic. You don't find it in our body naturally. And for it to be utilized by the body, it has to be processed to be turned into methylfolate. That is the form which the body then uses to carry out lots of vital processes. But around about 40% of the population don't do that process and that conversion very well. And so you might be taking 400 micrograms of folic acid, but your body is not making the right amount of methylfolate. So as a nutritionist, I would always recommend, if someone's looking for a preconception supplement, to be looking for one that contains methylated or methylfolate, because unless you test your genetics, you don't know whether you've got that variation that means you don't convert it well from folic acid. So just bypass those steps, go in with the methylfolate, because then you're giving your body what it naturally can use. And you obviously do get some folate from food as well. But by having that 400 micrograms of methylfolate, you're just bypassing any potential issues there. So that's something that is controversial in the medical field, but it's something that I would recommend, and I do recommend to all my clients, is to have a methylated folate, not folic acid.
I'm so glad that you said that. I actually read that somewhere and I can't remember where I read it, but it just didn't make sense to me. And you explained that very well. I thought that folate and folic acid were the same because they do sound similar. That's very
Yeah,
interesting. I'm glad that you said that.
I mean, because folate from food, it contains different types of folate. It contains some methylfolate, but it contains a different type that still has to go down the same path as folic acid. So that's why it's important to take the supplement when you're wanting to conceive, because you can't always get the right amount of folate from food as well. So it's not a myth, but it's just something that I always like to clear up with people
That's
because
really
it's
good.
important.
Yeah, that's really good to keep in mind and very good information to know. Sarah, it's been amazing to talk to you today. There's so much great knowledge that you've shared with us. So thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
It's been a wonderful conversation with you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your free video mini series that you're going to be doing in January?
Yes, so I'm going to be doing something called Fertile Foundations, helping people to build a nutrient-dense kitchen. So I'm going to be sending out very short videos, talking people through how to make sure their fridge, their freezer, their cupboards are full of those foods that are really going to support fertility. Also touching on the kitchenware that can be really helpful for fertility, because there's a lot of things in the kitchen, plastics and things like that, that can be detrimental. So I'm just going to be releasing 4 little free videos for people to just get that information, just so they know what foods they should be focusing on to have in the kitchen to support their fertility. So yes, if any of your listeners want to receive those videos, they can find my link through social media and sign up for that.
I will be signing up for that. I want to know about that stuff. That sounds awesome. Oh, I can't wait. That's so exciting. You can find more about Sarah at the_embryologist_nutritionist on Instagram or through her website, theembryologistnutritionist.co.uk. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you give us a follow and rate the show. And if you know someone who you think needs to hear this episode, give it a share so that we can spread the word and educate more mamas and women worldwide. And we'll see you next Monday for another juicy episode. For more information on pregnancy, birth, and parenthood, head over to my website or Instagram at blissfulbirth.co. And just a little reminder, the information contained in this podcast is here to educate and empower and does not replace the advice of your own healthcare provider.